Trump and Starmer, you'd think they were completely different characters standing for completely different politics. But when it comes to the nub of their politics, what they're actually doing, they are remarkably similar. Just like Trump, Keir Starmer is trying to tear down these key elements of the administrative state in order to allow corporate lobbyists, oligarchic lobbyists, to get whatever they want.
This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy.
Taking out a chainsaw isn't quite my style, but we are stripping away red tape and bureaucracy.
So what does this mean? Targeting the most vulnerable people in our society, slashing £5 billion from people with disabilities, while at the very same time protecting the super rich oligarchs who've never had it so good. This tells you everything you need to know about who Starmer is and who he really works for.
Far from regulating these massive tech monopolies, the government sacked the head of the Competition and Markets Authority for doing his job. He was summarily dismissed. He was replaced by a senior executive from Amazon, a company whose monopolistic practices are notorious, a company which is shutting down competition. This is a pure Trumpian move. This is exactly what Donald Trump is doing in the United States. And here we have our nice, respectable, civilized Prime Minister who would never do anything, any of the terrible things that Donald Trump has done, doing exactly what Trump has done. Now, you would have thought when someone directly incites riots in your country, when someone says that civil war is inevitable here and does everything that he can to try to make that civil war happen, when someone effectively points a loaded gun at your political system, you wouldn't be very friendly towards them. But Keir Starmer is grovelling before Elon Musk and the other tech bros. He's basically giving them everything they want. He's saying, oh, AI is going to be our saviour. That's going to sort everything out. We're going to have this magic thing called AI, and all these social problems like people not having homes and the NHS falling apart and school buildings collapsing and things. AI will come and sort those out. No. I've been told by some very clever tech pros, AI will sort it all out.
AI has arrived, and AI is a golden opportunity. AI growth zones. So we're going to get the best of the best on AI to be an AI superpower, working across government. And AI is the way.
AI, and oh, look, everything's changed. The naivety of the man is quite extraordinary. These people who shouldn't be allowed to step foot in this country because they are so threatening to national interests, to community, to society, to our prosperity, everything should be done to shut them out, to break up their monopolies. But in fact, Keir Starmer is doing the exact opposite. And he says, well, we have to do this because growth.
The number one priority of this Labour government is growth.
GDP growth is waved around like a magic wand. We just touch the economy with GDP growth and everything will be great and everyone will be prosperous and we'll all have better lives. And Starmer says that anything which interferes with growth is standing in the way of progress. But what we've seen is that it has not improved the position of many people in society. The cost of housing has gone through the roof. Food has become more expensive. Work has become less secure. We've seen growth and poverty rising side by side. The person who first formalised the concept of GDP growth, Simon Kuznets, said it should not be seen as a measure of social progress. It's got a far more limited use. It's a particular economic measurement, but it's not a measurement of well-being. It's not a measurement of prosperity. But it's treated by this government as if the two things are the same. Everything must be mobilised to generate GDP growth. In fact, human life and the natural world must be melted down into money in order to create more growth. But is that growth making us more prosperous? No, it's just taking wealth out of human life, wealth out of the living world, turning it into money which can then be accumulated and concentrated in the hands of the rich. But it's a very weirdly unbalanced approach to growth. So for instance, they say, oh, we can't have a full hospital building program because we can't afford that. But what we know is that hospitals are actually great generators of growth, not only because they employ very large numbers of people at a whole wide range of salaries, and so they put money in people's pockets which people can then spend, but also because they help people get back to work. But no, we can't have that. But we must have airport expansion everywhere. We must go hell for leather to build airports.
A third runway could increase potential GDP by 0.43%.
But what we've found out subsequently is that that figure of 0.43% of GDP growth by 2050 came from Heathrow Airport. And Reeves recites it in this massive speech he gave as if it were gospel, as if it were a fact, but it was actually planted by corporate lobbyists working for Heathrow Airport. That's the level that we're operating at. We're operating with people who are almost indistinguishable from the corporations that are lobbying them. On environmental issues, the Labour government is worse than the Conservatives were. Third runway at Heathrow, airport expansion elsewhere, new trunk roads, but allied to this is this venomous rhetoric. Anyone who stands in the way of environmental destruction is a blocker, a zealot, a NIMBY, cares more about bats and newts than about people, as if people don't also suffer from environmental catastrophe. The agencies which are there to protect the public, they must be swept away, they must be broken up, beaten down, torn up. They use this violent rhetoric against these essential arms of government which are what stand between us and capital. They are seen by Starmer and his Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, as being part of that coalition of blockers. And there is actually a Tory politician who said essentially the same things, and that's Liz Truss. She was the only one amongst the Tories who went as far down this line as Starmer and Reeves are going. Fortunately, Liz Truss was booted out after just 49 days. Starmer and Reeves have got a massive parliamentary majority. The Tories aren't going to oppose them on environmental lines because they would have done it if they could have dared to get away with it. They've got a clean run until 2029. They can do as much damage as they want to do, and it's very hard to see where the resistance is going to come from. Because as well as deregulating environmental protection, as well as announcing these horrendous new developments like a third runway at Heathrow, they've also sustained the extreme criminalisation of protest that the Tories introduced. You can get 10 years for something called public nuisance, which means anything and nothing. People have been arrested under public nuisance laws for marching down the street. And the Labour Party, which once stood for the protection of the right to protest, in fact, protest was absolutely essential to the Labour movement, says, yeah, we're happy with that. That's fine. Let's, stick with those Tory laws. It wasn't hard to see this coming. Long before he became leader, simultaneously, Keir Starmer was purging anyone remotely left-wing from the centre of power within the Labour Party, and at the same time managing our expectations and saying, we can't give you very much because there's no money. Just like the Tories said in 2010, there's no money, so we're going to have to carry on cutting public services. So the danger signs were there before he got into power. But since he got into power, it's just been quite incredible how far he is prepared to go. The real danger here is that if Labour do not provide a clear alternative to the Tories, if after 14 years of austerity and disaster for so many people in this country, if after all the social crises, the political crises, the environmental crises that the Tories inflicted, Labour is just continuity Tory, then people give up on politics as usual. They say, a pox on all your houses. What are you going to do? You're going to turn to someone who says, I don't have anything to do with all that politics nonsense. I stand outside. I'm with you. I'm the everyman who stands apart from political corruption. Nigel Farage, who of course, in my view, is the epitome of political corruption, bankrolled by some really grim financial interests, surrounded by oligarchic capital, grovelling to Donald Trump. But people will turn to Farage because they've given up on everyone else. All Farage has to do is sit there in the current with his big mouth open and he will be fed power. I completely understand people giving up on both Labour and the Tories. I mean, when they're so alike and so aligned in so many ways, why wouldn't you? But they're not the only options. There are other options in politics. There's the Green Party, there's independence. There are lots of opportunities now. Now that mainstream politics is falling apart, to do things differently. You don't have to cede the ground to Nigel Farage. You can actually go for a politics of hope, a more equal, distributive, fair, green country than we have at the moment. Whereas if you go for Farage as your alternative to politics as usual, you'll have everything getting even worse than it already is. The rich will get richer, the poor will get poorer, the natural world will be devastated. So keep that flame of hope burning, because it is there. We just have to be bold enough to recognise that two-party politics is over, and we can now vote as we please rather than being forced to vote for the lesser of two evils. I'm an equal opportunities critic. I'll pour contumely onto any political party which does bad stuff. I don't care who they are or what they call themselves, and nor does Double Down News. And this distinguishes us from so much of the media. So please support Double Down as a patron through Patreon.